So welcome to the 2020 Reserve Inspection Training. Everyone give a thumbs up if everyone sees DNRT Reserve Monitoring Checklist and Protocol 2020 sheet. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to go through this part really quickly so that way we can go over more in detail reading the forested landscape. So all of you are returning reserve inspectors, so I'm just going to go over this briefly. So what you're going to do for your reserve inspection, if you can, come into the office, or I can email this information to you if you would prefer to stay at home. You'll review the binders that we have here by looking at the maps so that way you can map your route, whether you want to go through, avoid all the wetland areas, or if, say, you're inspecting a property like Destruction Brook Woods where it has quite a topography difference, so that way you don't plan your inspection for going over a cliff or any rocky terrain. Also, you'll want to review to see if there is a conservation restriction on it. So that's just a set of rules that is part of the property that we as DNRT need to follow and upkeep. So that way, making sure none of our abutters are violating any of the conservation restrictions, like dumping leaves or cutting an unauthorized trail, those things as well. Not all the reserves have conservation restrictions. Some of them do, but not all. You'll also want to review past reserve monitoring reports. These are really important to review. Not only do they refresh your memory, since you are all repeat inspectors, will refresh your memory. You'll remember where the hot spots are, where people have repeatedly dumped their lawn clippings in the past or other things like that. It'll show you where like any ATV access points as well. And the reports, most of them have maps, so that way you can see what route you did last year versus the previous year. So say last year, I would say I don't think it was a wet fall, but say it was a wet fall last year and you were only able to do half the property because the other half of it was underwater. It was like and you have a wetland type reserve. So this year, since it's so dry, you'll be able to go to the section where it was super wet that you weren't able to go to last year. So that's why it's important to review and to make maps of your track line of where you inspect. So that way next year, you'll know where you didn't go to and you can go to it in the next year. You can borrow a DNRT camera and GPS if necessary. We have 2 GPSs that we can lend out now, so that'll make it easier. Just email me when you want to borrow the GPS, and you can go out. For any of our reserves, you can go out whenever you want. It's nice because when you're inspecting conservation restrictions, you have to call the landowner and see if you can get permission to go on a certain date. All reserve inspections, you can just go whenever you feel like it. Probably not in the middle of the night because it'll be dark and you won't be able to see anything, but anytime during the daylight hours. So just email me if you need to borrow a GPS, and we have those out to loan. And I will sanitize them so you don't have to worry about germs or any of those things. You might need a compass so that way you know which direction you're taking your photos. Pen or pencil with I bring the map and I just write on the back of the map which animals or birds I hear, see, make any notes or whatnot. I recommend wearing shoes that you don't mind getting wet in case you do go through some wet sections. And then it is important that everyone wears bright orange because reserve inspections are during the hunting season. Although we do not allow hunting on our properties on any of our reserves, there are always neighbors that could be hunting, and then there could always be that person who doesn't quite know where the boundary is, and who knows, he might see a deer that's, you know, maybe 10 feet over the line and thinks, hey, why not? So please wear lots of orange, and if you want, you can bring a buddy to go and inspect with you. If you want to bring someone to inspect with, I'm available. Then also Bruce, our AmeriCorps service member, would be happy to join you as well. So his email is bruce@dnrt.org. So if you want someone to join you, you can always ask him and he can come join you. Yeah, once you're done with the inspection, you'll be filling out the report. That's a photo sheet. It's a one-page report, date, reserve name, location, say Destruction Brook Woods, your name, the date that you inspected it, time of day, 2 p.m., weather, partly cloudy, 70s. And then, did you inspect the reserve, the entire reserve, or a portion? This is for incidences where, say, it's super wet and you can only get to half the property. Then this is like a great place for you to write that, so that way, besides the map, you know that you weren't able to inspect the whole property. And the following year you can. Then the next question is evidence of recent land use and or natural alterations. Evidence of recent land use would be tree cutting, ATV routes, hunting tags on the trees or flags so they can follow. There's a bunch of those at Shingle Island River. Natural alterations would be trees down, like a microburst, flooding issues, erosion. Is there evidence of encroachment or dumping by neighbors or abutters? That is an important question. If you can figure out what the address is of that abutter or neighbor, that would be even more helpful. If not, just marking it on a GPS and then sending me the GPS shape files, that will help me, and I'll be able to identify which neighbor is dumping. But the fun one, this is my favorite question. Which flora and fauna that you see on the property? Although every year it's gonna feel like you're writing down the same vegetation, like same plants, same animals, is really important for the long run, that you write down exactly what type of trees you see each year. Because eventually with climate change, we might see a shift in tree species or even just plant species in general. And DNRT, these properties are meant to be protected forever. So if we can have data from all throughout the early stages of like this climate change, and maybe in 100 years, if the organization's still around, hey, we've been around for 50 years almost. So we'll be able to have an idea of how the forest in the South Coast has evolved with climate change. And then because these are reserves, do you see anything on the trails? Like, is there any erosion problems? Or are there a bunch of trees down? Or say you notice a lot of the trail markers are no longer up. Just let me know. Write that in this section here, and we'll get it in with a work party, or Bruce and I or Linda will go out and take care of those. Any other observation, comments? This is like, say, if you met a butter and they want to become a member or something like that. Or if you notice something that's beautiful or eye-catching or special to you for the property, you can put that there. This section is for me, and then just check off if you took a GPS route of your route and I'm going to make a map for you, or you can make a map yourself. And then photos and a photo description sheet. Click that if you have those. And this is the photo description sheet. You just are going to write the name of the reserve, the date you took the photos. What I do for my way for numbering is at each location, I'll number the location and then the photos will be the second. So at location 1, it'll be 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. So I took 3 photos at location 1. Say at location 2, I only took 1. But at location 3, I took 4. So it would be like that. So that's how I number it. However, you can number it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way to 30 or whatnot. Direction, if you can, this you can do as well. And then description, say photo 1.1 was a blowdown. So saw an area where a recent windstorm took down some trees, and just do the description there. Let's see. Okay, I am going to unmute you all. Do this. Oh, here we go. And if anyone has any questions about the inspection, just I guess unmute yourself and I can answer that question for you right now. Okay, so we're all good.
Quick question. We email you photos, so you get the photos digitally. And you, as a separate document, you would get the description document. And you're fine with marrying the two, one and the other?
Yes. Yeah. So for photos, you can either upload them to your computer and send them to me. You can upload them to a Google photo folder, or you can come into the office and I can take them off either your computer or your phone, or if you put them on a USB, I can take them off that way. Yeah. And then if you, so for the GPS route, you can either borrow one of our GPSs. You can use your own GPS if you have one. And then you can also use your phone and use a tracking app. That's like what runners use. My favorite one to use is Komoot, Komoot. And there's also another app. So I could see myself. I'd be able to tell you. Okay, there we go. Hold on one minute. So this is the app right here. It's called Komoot. That's the one that I like to use. But then there's another one right here that's called Onyx Hunt. And that one, I'm able to get the actual property boundaries on it. And I can make marks like a waypoint mark, or I can track myself as well where I'm going. So here's an example. Right now it's showing non-quit, the beach there. So you can it's backwards, but you can see like, oh yeah, DNRT owns this. So yes, DNRT does own a beach in Nonquit. So there's that that app as well. Any other questions? Okay. I will get to the fun part. Interesting. Okay, here we go. Need to put you guys somewhere so I can read. Okay, so reading the forested landscape. So this information I got by reading two books. One is called Forest Forensic, which is a more of a field guide for reading the forested landscape, and then the other book is Reading the Forested Landscape and A Natural History of New England. And both of the books are by Tom Wessels, who is a professor at Antioch of New England, where he teaches ecology and other topics on looking at the environment as a whole, what the past history of the property was, and how it's influencing the current conditions of the property. So what I am going to talk about is the different types of forest disturbances, a thing called pillow and cradle, which can be a little bit hard to see down here in southern New England, but we will try to breed some small minor pillows and cradles tomorrow in the field. Crop fields versus hay fields, stone wall types. There are two types of stone walls. Wolf trees, or also field trees is another name for them. Stump decomposition and fire scars. So forest disturbances is actually a good thing. What makes old growth forests unique is that they've been disturbed multiple times. So there's different generations of trees within that old growth forest. Or what type of disturbances there are. There for natural, it's wind, fire, and also flooding as well. But we don't see that often here. So for wind, what creates disturbances? Thunderstorms. So thunderstorms, the wind comes from the west. Hurricanes, the wind comes from the south. And then northeasterns, they come from the northeast, the direction. Fire is another disturbance. Fire tends to clear out the understory and also can kill trees as well. And then an unnatural disturbance is human cutting, like clear cutting the forest and logging. So pillow and cradle. A pillow. So this is a pillow, and this guy with a long white beard, that's Tom Wessels. He's standing inside the cradle. So a pillow and cradle are formed when a wind knocks over a tree and the root ball is exposed. So has it been 2 years? I think 2 years ago when we got all that wind back in the winter from January through March. A lot of the trees in Destruction Brookwoods, the pine trees, fell over and the root ball came up with it. So what happens over time is that root ball, which is up in the air, it slowly decomposes and it creates this mound in front of this ditch. So can you guys see my mouse? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So where my mouse is, that's where the mound. So the tree fell in this direction because this is the ditch. So as the tree falls, it brings up the root ball and it leaves a ditch behind. And as the root ball here decomposes, it leaves a mound. So since this is a very large mound in a very deep ditch, this was probably a really large tree that fell, or a tree that had a very large root ball. And as you can see, trees have grown on top of that root ball as it decays. So that nice new decaying material is good. And because this tree in the background looks like hemlock, it was probably a white pine tree that fell over and created the pillow and cradle. Where we're going tomorrow at Wernick Farm, unfortunately, there's nothing as dramatic as this pillow and cradle. The ones that are there are a lot smaller and more difficult to discern whether or not or which type of wind caused the pillow and cradle. I believe in this video, this pillow and cradle was created by the hurricane of 38. So the wind was coming from, since this is a little bit further north, it was coming from the southeast and knocked over the tree. So when you stand on the mound, if you're trying to determine which direction the wind was coming from, you will stand on the mound and look over the cradle. So you stand on top of the pillow and look over the cradle, and that is the direction that the wind was coming from. So if you're standing on top of the cradle, you look over the pillow and the direction, or you're standing on the pillow and look over the cradle, the direction is from the west. That would be caused by a thunderstorm that took the tree down. But if it was coming from the south, it was a hurricane. And if it was from the northeast that you're looking at, it was a nor'eastern that took it down. Unfortunately, I could not find a pillow and cradle at Wernick Farm where we could determine which direction, because a lot of them are all smaller. But when you're out looking at your reserves, if you see anything that is a large mound next to a ditch, you might be able to determine what wind event occurred there years ago. So when you're out walking around, you're going to look at the terrain of the property to determine what land use was used. So if you look at this picture, it might be a little hard to tell, but the ground is really flat and there doesn't seem to be a lot of, I don't see any rocks. There's no rocks. The ground is flat. It's even. You don't notice from this photo, but there is a stone wall nearby that has a lot of small rocks in it. So this indicates that this land at one point was plowed multiple times. And what type of fields that get plowed multiple times are crop fields. So crop fields get plowed every year. So this land was plowed every year. The rocks that were picked up from it being plowed were then dumped in a stone wall or a rock pile nearby. So that's how you can tell that's a crop field. Hay fields are generally flat, even terrain as well. However, hay fields were only plowed multiple times in the beginning, and then after that, they weren't plowed. So the early colonists only plowed it several times, got like most of the big rocks out, and then after that they didn't have to worry about seeding it because the hay would reseed itself. So when you're looking for whether the terrain was a hayfield, you're going to look to see if it's relatively flat and even. There are going to be some slight unevenness, but it's an evenness that looks unnatural. And then you'll see probably a stone wall. As you can see in the distance here, there's a stone wall with lots of large rocks in it. They don't have small rocks, so that's an indicator too. And then this screenshot shows on the back side or the left side of the stone wall right here. This would be considered a pasture land because there's still lots of rocks. The ground isn't very even. And for pasture land, they didn't need to plow it at all. So the animals were able to go out naturally and just go and forage anywhere between the stone wall. While on the right-hand side of the stone wall, you can see the terrain has been manipulated. It's kind of even, and so this side of the field was probably a hayfield, and then this side was probably a pasture. And that's because of the type of stone wall that's between it. So this picture was taken at Wernick Farm. We'll go visit this tomorrow. So this stone wall is a crop stone wall. And how you can tell that it's a crop stone wall is that there are two outer layers of large stones, and then in between those two layers of large stone walls, there's a bunch of small stone walls, or small stones. So every year when they would go and plow the crop, they would take out all the stones and throw the stones in the stone wall, or they threw them in rock piles as well. So when you see a fat, wide stone wall, it indicates that the property land use there was used for crops. While a pasture stone wall typically just contains just large stones, there's no small stones in it, and it's a more narrow stone because the pasture was only plowed a couple times in the beginning, and then after that it did not need to be plowed again. So this stone wall is at our Von Erfelda CR, which is off of Barnes Joy Road. So you can check that out, but that's a prime example of a pasture stone wall, and the land is still being used as pasture. Well, not really pasture, but hay. It's another hayfield. So this photo is taken at Wernick Farm. So Wernick Farm does have a rock pile. So a rock pile is a dump site of small fist-sized rocks from the field being plowed every year. Another good example of a rock pile is at Ocean View Farm. As you guys are well aware, I hope, of the rock pile that's along the pipe stem that our contractor decided to build or opened it up for us so that way we could get through it. But he also created like his own little safe rock pile for people to be able to walk up it and actually see the view. So again, the rock piles were created next to areas where they grew crops. So that way, when every year they plowed, they had a place that they can dump all the rocks that they picked up. So New England has gone through many changes in the landscape over the last couple hundred years. So before colonial, before the colonies were established, Native Americans lived in the woods, and they did manipulate them. They did have fires, so that created meadows and such like that. But they didn't drastically change the landscape like the early settlers did, or as all of us did over the centuries, or yeah, over the years. So when the early colonists, they cleared a lot of the land up till like the 1800s. A lot of it was cleared for growing food. People were growing their own food. So there was crops. Everyone had like a homestead for themselves. It wasn't really mass production for like others. It was mainly more self-sustaining. And then the landscape got abandoned, and then back in the trees were able to regenerate, and then there was another clearing of New England for pastures. Sheep was a lot. Sheep was a huge profit at one point for the Merlino wool, and then also dairy farms were also very big. So a special type of tree grows in open fields. So it's called a wolf tree. Oops. Or another name for it is a field tree. So these trees grow where there's a lot of sunlight. So when trees grow in an area where there's a lot of sunlight, they like to stretch out their branches, and because they don't need to compete with other trees to get sunlight, so they can stretch out their branches as much. This picture on the left is a American beech tree. This was taken at Destruction Brook Woods. So this tree probably grew when there was an opening at some point in the past, and it was able to spread out its branches. While this tree on the bottom, this tree on the bottom, that is a white pine. That one is at Warnick. We will take a look at that tomorrow. So white pines are a special tree. When they grow in full sunlight, a pine weevil will go and say this is the main trunk of the tree, the very last growth spurt of it. So when the tree is only a couple years old, and when it grows in full sunlight, this pine weevil will come and lay its eggs into the top stem of the tree. And then as the eggs hatch, they eat the top stem. And so no longer the top part of the tree exists. So the branches that are lower will start to grow. So that's why if you see a white pine with many trunks, it is an indicator that it grew in an area with lots of sunlight. And a weevil came in and laid its eggs and killed like the main trunk of it. Other trees that grow in early or in old fields are cedar trees and birches. Those two trees love light. However, or I'm talking about white birch or paper birch and the red cedars. But once the other trees start to grow up in the area, they're shade intolerant, so they don't like the shade, so they end up dying. So if you are walking in the woods and you see some dead cedars, that shows that at one point that area was more of the open pasture field or any type of field that might have been abandoned, and then the forest regenerated around it. White pine are also an early successional tree. However, they're a more shade tolerant species, so they won't die when other trees grow up around it. Another way you can read your landscape is reading the stump decomposition. So here are two trees that are relatively easy to identify. So for white pine trees, they decay outwards to inside. So the bark and everything, the outer bark will fall apart first while leaving the center. And then hemlock is the opposite. Hemlocks decompose from inside outwards. So you can see lots of hemlock stumps at like Ridge Hill. I might have seen, I saw a couple at Wernick, but our northern properties you tend to see the evidence of stump decomposition. You can also tell from this stump here, it has a relatively flat top. So it was probably cut. And if you look around it, you don't see any pile, a long linear pile or mound, then it shows that it was cut and taken away for lumber. So this information, nurse logs and stumps, is actually pretty fascinating because now every time I go out in the woods, I'm like, oh my God. So what happens is when a tree gets cut or falls down, some trees will resprout. So this tree here, or you see the three trees. So these three trees grew on top of a stump. So there used to be a much larger red maple tree, and it got cut. And when it was cut, it sent up saplings to grow around it, so it resprouted. And the way that you can tell what the original size of the tree before it was cut is you're going to go right to the interior in the middle of each of these trunks, and from the middle through all of them and draw a circle, and that's what the original size of the tree was when it was cut. Trees like white pine tend to be a nursery for other trees. The way it decomposes is perfect for promoting the growth of new vegetation. So a lot of places you'll see a long linear mound with a bunch of trees growing on top of it, and that's from a log that most likely a white pine log that rotted away and is promoting new tree growth. Fortunately, I wasn't able to find one at Wernick when I went. So another disturbance is fire, and how you can tell if fire hit your region is you're going to look for a fire scar. So this is what a fire scar looks like. Fire scars are going to be on the going to be on the bottom of the tree, while other scars could be from logging or other disturbances by human-made vehicles. Those scars are going to be up higher. They're not going to touch the base of the tree. you there, if we have time tomorrow, we'll go to Miller Brook Conservation Area, which is right near Warnick Farm. It's if you went on the Long Dam hike, we walk through it. And there, in 2014, I think, somewhere around there, there was a forest fire, and you can actually still see the burns on the tree. So sometimes trees will have this black marking on them. How you can tell whether that black marking is from fire or if it's from a fungus, you'll touch it. If your fingers are black, it's charcoal, so it's fire. If you don't see anything, then it's just a fungus. And if your fire is on a hill, the fire will burn the hottest on the uphill side of the tree, because as gravity works, it brings all the branches and leaves down the side of the hill, and those leaves will get stuck on the uphill side of the tree. So there's a lot of fuel for the fire. So the fire is gonna hang out there on the uphill side of the tree, and it'll burn there the longest, and that tends to be where you'll find your fire scars. There was a fire on a hillside or mountain. Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
Leah, the fire scar, maybe I didn't catch it completely. Could that have been lightning?
Lightning is going to be further up on the tree, so fire scars are always going to hit the bottom of the tree, the base of it, where it touches the ground, because the fire is going to burn the longest on the side of the ground where all the leaf litter is.
And it didn't seem right that the when you had that nesting bunch of hardwoods with the one that was cut in the center, you were saying that the original diameter of it went through the middle of the other ones?
Yeah, so the original tree size was you take the middle of each of those trunks and you draw a circle between them. So this tree was, if you're on the walk tomorrow, I'll point out this tree because it's a great example. So you go from the middle and you connect them all. So the original tree was larger than what the existing trunks are, and it's pretty fast.
Much larger than what the stump is that's left.
Yeah. So these trees grew up on the edge of the stump. So that's how you can tell it's the middle of current trunks. But you can, I see this all the time now once I review this in the book. It's amazing. Like, you go and look back and you can see like how massive some of these trees were when they got taken down. And you can see evidence of it. So most trees, they just grow in a single trunk. But when you see a multiple trunk tree, it means that it grew from a stump cutting. There's only a few trees that actually grow multiple trunks, and they're more like willows and those smaller trees. So maples don't do it, oaks don't do it. Like I said, white pine only does it when it grows. It starts in full sunlight, and a white pine weevil comes and lays its eggs. So most trees naturally grow with one trunk, and disturbance.
Is the wood just as good from those trees?
It depends on how they grow. If they grow straight and tall, then yes. But if they grow at an angle, then you're not going to have enough feet of wood. But wildlife value, they work probably just as good. Don't know if there's an ecological difference between one trunk versus many trunks. Might be better for wildlife because say like a squirrel can bounce from one tree to the other.
You mean like if a nut tree produces as many nuts up top?
Yeah, I'm not sure. If there's been research on that. Any other questions? Okay, so tomorrow we will meet at 10 a.m. at Wernick Farm. I may open the gate. I need to double check to see how many vehicles are going to be there. But we'll walk around and I'll point out everything that we reviewed today in person or in the field. Some of this stuff can be a little confusing until you go out into the field and actually view it yourself. And then things start to click a bit more. I know it took me a couple times reading going through the book to actually understand it. Also, I want to show for you is this website. So it's New England Forest. It's a blog post, and you can just type in "reading the forested landscape," and it's probably the 5th or 6th link down. Or you can just Google "reading the forested landscape videos." I'm bringing up this page because Tom Wessels goes over everything. So if you want a better teacher from the expert himself, you can watch these videos. I did that while I was sick. Very entertaining, and he had some great examples. Probably some examples that are much better than what we'll find out in the field tomorrow. Mainly the pillow and cradles versus like which type of wind event took down those trees. In a couple of years, destruction brookwoods will be a prime example, but until the trees decompose to the point where the root ball is gone, will be a while. So unfortunately, I haven't found anything. I've been searching whenever I go on the properties for a good pillow and cradle. If you find one, please let me know, so that way I can go out and document it. Maybe we can go out and figure out what wind event took down the tree. It's kind of neat that you can tell what wind event took down the tree by the direction the wind came from. That was another thing I learned about that. Oh, so here are the 2 books as well. Forest Forensic, that's a more of a field guide. So it has photos of like pillows and cradles, nurse logs, etc. And then Reading the Forested Landscape, which I have in the office. Anyone can borrow it if you would like to. I think we have multiple copies here at the office. I think Linda has one as well. And this book goes over everything in much more detail. It's a fascinating book. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Well,
We'll see you at Wernick.
yeah, we'll see you at Wernick in the morning.
10 o'clock.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Leah.
a
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you.